In the United States National Park System alone, there are more than 84 million acres of preserved woods, deserts, mountains, and other wilderness, so it's no surprise that in the last 100 years, there have been a number of cases of hikers going missing. Many of those who vanished were young children and inexperienced hikers, but some were healthy and seasoned outdoors people. But is there more to these disappearances than just kids wandering off or hikers becoming disoriented? What could cause someone to seemingly vanish into thin air? There are two approaches people take to explain these mysterious disappearances, earthly and supernatural. Most hiking experts would say that these missing hikers had common mistakes like taking on more than they could handle or failing to time their turn back to beat the sunset. However, some disappearances have become a focus of urban legend, online message boards, and non-fictional books. In fact, Missing 411 author and former police officer at Yosemite National Park, David Paulides thinks something more intriguing is afoot. His books examine more than 1,100 cases of people who mysteriously vanished in United States national parks. Let's be honest, although it might be fun to imagine monsters or something spookier, no proof for any supernatural disappearances has ever been provided. But there have definitely been some mysterious disappearances both in the United States and abroad in formal, federal government-run national parks, as well as in related spaces like national forests, recreation areas, state parks, and more. Here are some of the most fascinating cases to date, starting in the early 20th century. Bessie and Glenn Hyde, 1928. Bessie and Glenn Hyde were honeymooning in northern Arizona at the Grand Canyon when they vanished. They were traveling down the Colorado River by scow in October 1928 and planned to boat through the Grand Canyon. Bessie would have been the first woman ever to do so successfully. Glenn had run tough rivers before, but Bessie was a boating newbie. The couple ran across other boaters a few weeks before their disappearance, who said they got the feeling that Bessie wanted to turn back, but Glenn was pushing her on. If they completed the trip successfully, they could go on a paid lecture tour. So, this trip was more than just fun. There was money at stake. Cut to several months later, the Hyde's boat was discovered that winter, seemingly undisturbed. It was upright and full of supplies, but the couple was gone. There are many theories about what happened to the Hydes. Did they disembark and try a difficult side hike? Did they have an argument that turned violent? Or were they abducted? There are conflicting reports about what happened to the Hydes, and more than one Bessie Hyde sighting in the years that followed. Catherine Van Alst, 1946. 8-year-old Catherine Van Alst disappeared from Devil's Den State Park near Arkansas's Ozark National Forest, where she and her family were camping. Van Alst apparently was playing with her brothers when she wandered off and got lost, couldn't find her way back. What makes her disappearance remarkable is that when she was found after 6 days wandering the woods, she was eerily calm. University of Arkansas student Porter Chadwick was part of the search party that found Van Alst. He told the Pittsburgh Press that when he found her, she walked stoically out of a cave and just said, "Here I am." She had survived on berries and spent nights sleeping in caves. Many other hikers have gotten lost in that part of the Ozarks and not been as lucky as Van Alst. Paul Weldon, 1946. There's an area in Green Mountain National Forest, near Glastonbury Mountain and Vermont's Long Trail that believers in the paranormal call Bennington Triangle. The area got this name because of a handful of mysterious disappearances which occurred between 1945 and 1950. Although many more have been recorded over the years, paranormal author Joseph Citro coined the term because of the supposedly supernatural circumstances surrounding their vanishings. Paula Weldon was the second person to go missing in that area of Green Mountain National Forest during this time period. 18-year-old Weldon was a college student who set out on a long trail in December of 1946. She was dressed for walking and not a long hike, wearing jeans, a coat, and sneakers. Her attire implied that she planned to return before dark, when temperatures were supposed to dip below freezing. Weldon told her roommate that she was taking a long walk. She never returned. Several people spotted her as she hitchhiked her way to the trail and walked to the trailhead. When Weldon didn't come back by dark, her roommate let the school know and the search began. Classes were suspended so students could help with the search. The process was disorganized at first until Weldon's father called in favors from police in 2 surrounding states. Unfortunately, the search didn't pan out, and frustrated family and friends had their own theories about what happened to her. Did Weldon run off with a boyfriend? Was she abducted? Did she commit suicide, or did she die of exposure because of her inappropriate attire? No one has ever discovered her body, so her disappearance remains a mystery. There's a rumor that this area of the Long Trail is home to a creature called the Bennington Monster. Could this Sasquatch-like animal have something to do with the disappearance? What do you guys think? One positive outcome of this case was that the lack of organization in the search for Paula Weldon led to the creation of the Vermont State Police, which is responsible for all wilderness search and rescue missions in the state. Dennis Martin, 1969. 6-year-old Dennis Martin was on a camping trip near the Tennessee-North Carolina state line with his family in the summer of 1969. It was an annual Father's Day tradition. All of the men in the Martin family headed to Smoky Mountain National Park to camp and hike. Dennis and his brothers had planned a prank on the adults. They were going to hide separately in the bush and jump out on different sides of the campsite to try and scare everyone. It was a typical joke that should have ended with some startled shouts and then a lot of laughter. The laughter ended quickly, though, when they realized that Dennis was missing. Family, park rangers, and other hikers spread out to search for Dennis almost immediately, but he was nowhere to be found. That evening there was heavy rainfall, which is bad news when you're trying to track a missing little boy. The search for Martin became the largest in National Park Service history. One of the people searching was Park Ranger Dwight McCarter, who had successfully tracked down missing persons, including young children. McCarter was a seasoned tracker, and he was struck by the complete lack of any sort of tracks. Dennis seemed to have disappeared completely, leaving no trace at all. His disappearance is still a mystery. One possible lead that searchers didn't follow was a report from another family the evening that the boy went missing. The Key family allegedly heard a scream and then saw a bear man with something slung over its shoulder that looked like it could be a small child. We'll never know whether this was related to Martin's disappearance, but one thing did come out of it: the realization that having so many volunteers might have meant some vital clues were trampled on. Nowadays, searches involve less people, but they have more training. David Gonzalez, 2004. At 8 a.m. on a July day in 2004, David Gonzalez asked his mother if he could have the car keys. There was a box of cookies in the car, and the 9-year-old wanted a treat. The car was only 50 yards away, and his mother watched him as he walked to the parking lot near their Big Bear Lake campsite in Northern California's San Bernardino National Forest. She turned her back for a second, and when she looked around again, Gonzalez was gone. His mother reported that she heard no sound at all when her back was turned, though she did see a beige truck speeding out of the campground around the time her son went missing. Since there were no signs of abduction, authorities did not pursue that lead. What sense does that make? The mother literally hears a truck speeding off, and nobody investigates it. What's wrong with these people? The cookies that Gonzalez went to get were still in his family's car locked, so he never made it to the car. rescue teams in San Bernardino County scoured the woods for Gonzalez. They found no signs of struggle or the boy. The search went on for 9 days, but rescuers never found him alive. Prabdeep Sran, 2013. Prabdeep Sran was a 25-year-old Canadian Army reservist who disappeared from Australia's Cosequito National Park, located in the southwestern state of New South Wales. Sran was studying abroad in Australia in May of 2013 when he decided to take a 1,700-mile road trip from the Gold Coast to Melbourne. Sran rented a van, drove to the park's Charlotte Pass in the snowy mountains, and no one has ever seen him since. The search began when the rental company discovered that the van wasn't returned. Sran hadn't told anyone what route or side hikes he was planning, and the search may have started days or even a week after he went missing, since it was a rental company that first reported the disappearance. Searchers figured out his hike plans by looking at the search history on a laptop they recovered from his van. Sran's family hired private searchers after Australian authorities called off their search after only 2 weeks. The investigators used tower data from Sran's phone and trained a dog to track his trail to a treacherous area called the Western Fall Wilderness. Just 1 day before his van was due back to the rental agency, Sran embarked on a difficult and time-consuming hike in snowy weather. Why would a trained military reservist make a choice like that? Despite a private search that went on for over a year, Sran's body has never been recovered. Jacob Gray, 2017. The mystery of what exactly happened to 22-year-old Jacob Gray will likely never be solved. The athletic young man rode his mountain bike into a rainstorm in Olympic National Park in Washington in April of 2017, was never seen alive again. His bike and gear were found on the side of a trail, but Gray was nowhere to be found. This kicked off a search largely championed by his father Randy, who actually sold his house and closed his contracting business so that he could fully devote his time to searching for his son. Randy spent months doing that, all the while theorizing about what could have happened to his child. He considered hypothermia, accidental drowning, an accident, and so on. He also worried that burgeoning mental health issues had gotten the best of him. In August of the same year, he got the phone call that a group of researchers had found Jacob's remains and supplies higher on the mountain than anyone expected. The likely cause of death was hypothermia. What do you guys think? Do you think foul play was involved? Or do you think it was another case just like all the others? Cian McLaughlin, 2021. A 27-year-old Irish man visiting Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming has been missing since June of 2021. The last known sighting of Dublin native Cian McLaughlin pinpoints him heading in the direction of Taggart Lake. This is located on an 8-mile trail that is very difficult in nature. When he didn't show up to work, he was reported missing. He held dual U.S. and Irish citizenship. His car was found nearby and kicked off a search that formally ended 2 weeks later. 45 helicopter searches and other high-tech tools have yet to reveal any information about this man's whereabouts. His family and the U.S. National Park Service have since put out a poster with the photo and details, as well as the hashtag #FindCian to keep him top of mind for visitors in the area. The disappearance is extra puzzling, as his uncle described that particular trailhead as his favorite. Another hiker reported seeing McLaughlin with a backpack, so it appeared that he had just gone out for a casual stroll. Gabby Petito, 2021. The disappearance of Gabby Petito made international headlines when her boyfriend Brian Laundrie returned from their road trip all by himself. The couple, who posted heavily about their travels on social media, had an ambitious schedule of coast-to-coast national park visits, although several fights between the pair were noticed by others, including the police, along the way. Petito's family says that their last contact with the 22-year-old was at the end of August of 2021. Laundrie arrived at home September 1st with Petito and refused to speak with police or her family. Her family reported her missing September 11th after a lengthy lack of contact. In fact, they don't believe the last text they received from Petito was actually sent from her. Sadly, on September 19th, Petito's remains were found in Bridger-Teton National Forest in Wyoming. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Laundrie disappeared on September 17th, and on October 20th, his skeletal remains were found inside the Carlton Reservoir in Sarasota, Florida. As of press time, his cause of death is still unknown. I hope you guys enjoy this change of pace with these truly horrifying disappearances. If you would like to hear more videos like this in the future, please comment in the comment section below and share what themes you would have in mind. If you want your regular true scary story featured on an upcoming video, email my email in the description box below. Until we meet again, like the video, subscribe, and share. P.S. Stay sinful. Ha 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 ha.
You know, I thought that I knew my dad better than anyone. But one day we were chatting and I heard a story that I'd never heard before. He told me how, when he was younger, he almost actually went pro in boxing, but due to an injury, he had to stop. But that got me wondering, how many other stories don't I know? That's why I got my father Storyworth. Storyworth is an online service that helps you and your dad or father figure connect through sharing stories and memories, and preserves them for years to come. Every week, Storyworth emails your dad a thought-provoking question of your choice from a vast pool of possible options, and each unique prompt asks questions that you've never thought of, like, what do you think is your greatest personal achievement? Or, if you could give some advice to your younger self, what would you say? I've really enjoyed reading my dad's answers to those questions. I've discovered stories and memories that I'd never heard about, and learned new things about stories that I thought that I really knew. Like the fact that my dad has only one continent to travel to before he can say that he's been to every continent in the world. After 1 year, Storyworth compiles all these questions and stories, including photos, into a beautiful keepsake book the whole family can share for generations. I'm holding on to mine, and I'm going to personalize it with my kids and give a copy to them when they move out, so that they can continue to add more history for their own kids. So, give all the fathers in your life a meaningful gift that you'll both cherish for years to come. Storyworth. Right now, for a limited time, you'll save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/bescared. That's STORYWORTH.com/bescared to save $10 on your first purchase. Storyworth.com/bescared. I used to work the docks of a salmon cannery in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, no days off from May until August. It was a really cool job, if I'm being honest, but lots of seedy characters. Seasonal work in remote places seems to attract people who don't really fit in with normal society, I guess, or people who, well, want to get away from something, maybe. Gary, he was one of those people. He had worked at another place in town that was owned by the same parent company, and in the lead up to the fishing season, he was lent to us for some carpentry tasks. Gary was probably in his 40s or 50s, grey hair, weird delivery in his speech. Not like a speech disorder, just like weird, I guess, is the best way to explain it. Like he was smiling inside about something grotesque while he spoke. When he first got to our camp, he was telling me the HR staff kept asking him all these personal questions. I asked what kind of questions, and he responded that they wanted his full name and phone number. He told them that he didn't feel comfortable with that and would be willing to work for a reduced rate if he could just keep the information to himself. Obviously, that was a huge red flag. One day, though, I'm working with a coworker on a little welding project when Gary pops out of a doorway. He goes, "Hey, you guys want some meat?" We've been eating cafeteria food for weeks at this point and working hard enough that we always maintain a caloric deficit. You don't say no to good food, right? He cut us each off a slice, and it was a smoked something. Now, here's some personal info on me. My family is Eastern European. I was born in New York City and then spent half of my childhood in NC. I've been eating smoked meats of every variety all my life, pretty much. It's a piece of my culture, basically. But I don't know what the heck this was. It was almost pork, I guess, but it wasn't pork. Gary goes, "You guys like that?" To which we respond sheepishly, "Yeah, thanks, Gary." Gary literally laughs at this, like slowly and creepily, and then just leaves. Now, me and this guy that I'm working with look at each other and sort of laugh it off and say, "Well, we must have just eaten Gary's wife or something." Dark vibes. I love my job. Anyway, later that night, I'm in the cafeteria alone eating a bagel. Gary walks in. "Hey man, you liked the meat earlier?" "Yeah, Gary, it was good," I respond. Gary goes, "That's funny, man," and then just sort of laughs softly. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I ate a slice of Gary's wife that day. I haven't told this story much, and it still creeps me out to this day. See, when I was 12 years old, in about 2013, I moved to this old house built in about the 1940s. No one has lived in this house for over 30 years, and it was the first fall that I'd seen at this house. I was taking trash out to our back porch, and from there I could see a tree line that's normally very green and hard to see through. But seeing how it's fall, the leaves are almost all fallen. And as I walk out to take the trash out, I look at the tree line. About 30 to 40 yards away, I see 4 or 5 of at least 7 foot tall, like pure white humanoid and no-faced creatures. I stand there in awe, not knowing what to think. It honestly looks like they're sort of talking with hand gestures or something, but I couldn't hear anything, obviously. Now that I think of it too, I really heard nothing at the time. No birds, bugs, or even the trees moving with the visibly moving branches. I screamed, "Hey," to which the creatures became sort of motionless like a statue. Then I proceeded to ask, "Who are you?" To which I stand there for a second before the creatures dispersed. Now I could see far into the woods, and they all went their separate way, not even hearing a leaf or a twig crack when they fled. But they ran off so quickly that it almost seemed like a blur as well. To be honest, after that, I sort of completely forgot about the experience until later that night, which I know is really weird. As I said though, I was young, and at this time my mum worked night shift and wasn't there for when I screamed at these creatures. For your interest too, I lived on essentially farmland, but my neighbors could easily walk up my driveway in a matter of like 2 or 3 minutes. So, later that night, around 9 p.m, I heard knocking on my back door, the one where it leads to the back porch where the creatures were, and I thought that maybe my mum told the neighbors to check up on me or something, so I go to check it out. I go to the back door, turn the back porch light on, and open it to where nobody was there. Casually, I sort of chopped it up to maybe one of my dogs hitting the door or something around like that. Now, after this, knocking kept coming from the door, and it was weird because every time that I rounded a door to where I could see the back door, the knocking just stopped. This happened a few more times every few minutes as well, ranging from when I turn my back from the door to when the moment that I sit back on my bed, to just waiting 5 or 10 minutes before it happened again. After about an hour of this, I think, and increasing anxiety, I got fed up and I went outside to scream, I don't know who you are, but you better stop. And to my surprise, it did. For about 30 minutes, that is. Then the knocking came around the house, on the windows, the doors, the walls from the outside for about another 30 minutes. I was scared, curled up in the corner of my bed. After the 30 minutes, there was one last bang beside my window that I felt like sort of shook the house a bit, and was shocked the window didn't break, in fact. And that was the end of it. There was really nothing for the rest of the 5 years that I lived there. The shocking part, though, was that the outside was old, as stated, and could honestly be broken with one good swing to the exterior. But where that final bang was, there was no sign of any impact. Honestly, I think that's what scared me the most, too. That this creature could full force shock my house and leave, no damage whatsoever. I lived in Tennessee, by the way, if this maybe helps figure out what this thing is. Side note, too, is that I have some friend stories with these creatures if anyone wants to know about them, but for now, this will have to do. Me and my roommate moved into this place about 10 months ago. The landlord who lives above us told us that this place is haunted. Our landlord is 80 years old and apparently channels. She says that she channels her higher self as well as living people who passed on and Ashta or something. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, sure. When we looked at the house, we saw the sauna. It has an old wooden door, but after we moved in, handprints appeared on the door, and they looked like they were sort of dragging down, I guess. I mean, that could have been anything, right? But fast forward a little bit, and I'm in the bathroom. My roommate downstairs is in his room. I hear footsteps coming up the stairs, and I wait to see if he pops up, and no. I call him over Facebook and ask, "Are you upstairs?" But I can hear him downstairs in the room. He says, "No, I'm in bed. Why?" I explain that I heard footsteps. I go down to his room. Later, he needs to use the bathroom. And the same thing happens to him. He hears footsteps and nobody's there. We stayed in the same room that night, and the next thing that happened was just super creepy. You see, me and my roommate were sitting in his bedroom watching some videos and drawing. He has this old music snow globe that he has on his dresser. The video that we had playing was a gameplay video, and it had music box music for the background sound. We thought the sound was a little bit odd, so we paused it, put the video back 10 seconds, and played it again. We then realized that it was the snow globe that was actually playing. We could hardly believe it. A while later, and we were in bed, and in the middle of the night, we both heard a bang. We didn't see what it was because, we just got out of there, but when we got up the next day, his Silver the Hedgehog pop figure was on the ground, with his limbs, and all 4 of them, ripped off. And there's just no way that should have been possible. There was a hand on the sofa, 2 feet off the ground, a leg under a blanket, and 2 just on the floor. The GameCube that we have was also opened, and the creepy thing was that the little clear stand pop figures that we have, all of them were unmoved, untouched, except for that pop figure. It was a really weird experience, and for us, we just could never explain it. A month later, I used this filter on TikTok. It's supposed to catch ghosts or whatever. It has sort of glowing eyes and would appear when it finds a face. And I always felt like something was watching me, and so I started to film. I walked up the stairs to the main floor, and something popped up at face level, looking like it was peeking around the corner. I got a bit freaked out by that, I admit, so I ran to my room. A week ago, our landlord was out for a family thing, and we heard someone running up and down the hall at 11 p.m. at night. We heard banging and thumping, and it sounded like somebody was dropping something. Our landlord is not the strongest and can't run or carry things, so We found this out later, that she definitely wasn't home, and even if she was, there's just no way that she could have done this. Again, a few days ago, I was downstairs trying to find some towels, and my roommate is upstairs. He said, "Rose, Rose, are you up there?" I replied with, "No, why?" And not even a minute later, I hear something loudly whisper in my ear, a pookie or something like that, which is just a weird thing me and my roommate say to each other. I jumped out of my skin and looked to the door wondering if my roommate snuck up on me or something, but he was upstairs, still in the bathroom. 2 days ago, I cleaned the bedroom, and all was good. Like, I was proud of that room. And yesterday, we found a dead spider on the dresser. Today, all the legs were ripped off and placed all around it. We just constantly feel like we're being watched, and we always hear footsteps, like I said. Have you ever felt something like this? Like someone is giving you a death glare that you can almost imagine them being there? You can sort of feel it, I guess. But when you look around, there's nobody there. That's how I feel a lot in this place. When we come home from work, we can sort of feel it, as if something's looking at us through a window or something. We're moving soon, and it's starting to get worse as well. We mentioned moving before the whisper in my ear, and I don't know if it wants us to stay or go, but in any case, we're getting out of here as quickly as we can. A few years ago, in the northern parts of Sweden, I'm going out for a nice evening of fishing. I am what I guess is a fisherman supervisor. I check that the other fishermen get their license at a certain area of the lakes and streams and whatnot. And anyway, this is in late summer, and I've been doing my round, which I usually end with going to a small lake and fly fishing for some trout. This lake or pond is pretty deep in the forest, and I rarely meet anyone there. Actually, I've never really met someone there, I guess. This lake looks kind of like a crater, I guess you could say. A perfect round circle that's perhaps 100 meters in diameter. It contains a natural population of perch and trout. Anyway, it's a warm summer evening with a slight breeze. The birds are chirping and the fish is rising to all the insects spawning on the surface. I rig my gear and aim for one of the fish rising to the right of me. At the same second as my fly lands on the surface, it's like someone pauses time or something. The sun hides behind a cloud, the wind stops blowing, the birds are suddenly completely silent, and the fish stop eating too. All of a sudden, a smell rises from the ground that I'm standing on. It smells like something dead, something really rotten, like I have a carcass buried under my feet. All of a sudden, I'm aware that there's also something walking out of the forest behind me. Maybe 10 to 15 meters behind me. It's like I can see it in the corner of my eye, but I still really can't see it. I know it's really hard to understand, but every hair in my body is on end, and it's suddenly very cold around me too. This thing watching me just stands there, and I don't have the courage to turn around at all. I see my fly sink to the bottom, but I can't move. I can't do anything about it because I don't dare move. Then the wind just hits me, and it carries the awful smell away. The sun hits me again, a bird is singing somewhere in the forest, and the almost overtaking feeling of being watched lets go of me. I turn around suddenly, and there's nothing there. On the lake, the fish start rising again, and at that, I pack my gear and I throw the backpack on my back, and I run for it. Through the forest, all the way to my car. I hit the gas and drive like a maniac until I find the big road and civilization again. I park at the side of the road and say to myself, what the heck was that? My heart is still racing. I haven't visited this lake since this happened, and I know I won't be. What do you guys think it was, though? I've probably visited this place 20 times before this happened and never felt anything like it. The only thing is that I'm always afraid of bears when I visit it. I do fish at a lot of ponds and lakes that are pretty deep in the forest, but nothing like this has ever happened. There's a lot of wildlife in these places, of course. Deers, moose, fox, the occasional wolf, bobcat, and bear. I'm familiar with them, and this just wasn't that. I'm never afraid of meeting one except when I've been visiting this particular lake, and anyway, I apologize for my bad English. Like I said, I'm from Sweden, and it's not my first language, but I hope you get the gist of it, and if you have any ideas of what this could have been, then I would really love to hear it. Thanks. So, I'm a pretty typical teenager from Japan, male. And ever since I can remember, I have throughout my lifetime had reoccurring encounters with some strange people. Be it in terms of looks or behavior, these encounters can happen anywhere from a week's space to several months even. And it always seems like when I do, it was their intention to meet me. I know that sounds weird, but let me explain. So my most recent one was on my way home from school. During my walk, I was looking down at my phone for a short moment, about to text one of my friends that I planned to have over at my house later. And as I looked up, a young man looking like he was maybe in his 20s was approaching me a few meters ahead. This confused me for a minute, as it was a straight and fairly long path ahead. I thought to myself that while I may have been looking at my phone, I would have surely have noticed him coming from the corner of the path a good length away. Or at least I expected him to be closer to that corner or something. But there he was, approaching me from the middle as if he had appeared from almost thin air. His hair was dark brown, a bit unkempt, but still pretty good looking, and he had green eyes. His clothes were fairly ordinary too, keeping a sort of laid-back summer style to it, I guess. But the most remarkable thing about him was his tattoo, or maybe it was a mark per se or something. In any case, it was a black line running from his left chin and down to underneath his shirt. As he got close enough for conversation, he sort of stopped me and asked for my name. When I told him, he said that he'd heard about me before. This obviously really confused me, as I'm not exactly like a celebrity or anything, but I didn't think too much of it. We then had some boring small talk, but he genuinely seemed pretty cheerful. Just as he was about to take off too, he told me that I should probably wait for my friend. He didn't give me much of a chance to respond to this before just walking off in the direction that he came from. I thought about what he said and turned around to walk back to school. I sort of glanced behind my back not long after, only to find that he was nowhere to be seen. As I made it back to my school, sure enough, I found my friend waiting by the gate. She apparently thought that we were going to walk to my place together and had been waiting for me for quite a long time. I apologized and we began walking, and, well, that's pretty much the end of it. I obviously didn't tell her about the encounter, but I thought about it when she left, because I didn't even tell him or hint about my friend at all, so how would he have known? These are the types of encounters that have kept on happening, throughout my whole life, sometimes very frequently too, and I just don't know why. These people I meet just seem so not real, and usually know something that I've never told them about, which leads me to believe that these people aren't human at all. I might post more stories if anybody would be interested in them, but I would like to know if somebody might have some answers, I guess, to who or what this could be, and why I keep encountering them. So I was backing up the photos on my phone today, and I found some which I took the day of the incident. And I gave it some thought and decided, why not share it on here, being anonymous and all that. Maybe this can serve as a PSA of sorts. Always trust your gut feeling. So last year, I was living by myself at the time, before my partner and I moved in together, that is. For some background too, my partner used to work very hectic shifts. Sometimes he would finish at 5 p.m, sometimes 6 p.m, sometimes 9 p.m, and he would let me know if he'd be dropping by that day, though he usually wouldn't be able to give me a time, but at least I knew that he'd be coming by. It was around 8 p.m, and I was upstairs in the bedroom just working on an embroidery project. I had my AirPods in, so I wasn't too aware of what was going on around me. I remember feeling the bed rattle though, since my bedroom was right above the front door, so whenever someone closed the door, seeing as it was very old and heavy, it always rattled my bed frame. This would usually indicate my partner had arrived. I didn't immediately go downstairs to greet him, as I really wanted to finish off the piece of embroidery that I was working on. It was about 5 minutes before I took out my AirPods and proceeded to make my way out of my bedroom and onto the stair landing. I was about to call out for him too when I realized that he didn't leave his work jacket or work boots in the entry. And he knew full well that I don't like shoes, especially work boots, all over my carpeted floors. I assumed that I must have imagined feeling the bed shake then. So I went back into my bedroom and was about to put my AirPods back in when I very distinctly heard a big crash come from downstairs. It sounded like something very heavy was just dropped. I immediately freaked out and called my boyfriend's name down from my bedroom doorway, but I got no reply. I sure as heck started hearing heavy footsteps though pacing towards the entryway. My gut feeling was that something here was very wrong. I turned, grabbed my phone from the bed, and bolted to the bathroom, which was the only room in the house with a lock. I called the police, and as I started hearing those same heavy footsteps make their way up the stairs, I have never, ever been so scared of those creaking sounds coming from the stairs, but it was different then. At the time, it felt as if I've never heard a scarier sound, to be honest. As I was on the phone to the police, the only thing that I could tell the lady on the phone was my address over and over again. I was more focused on how I was going to get out of there, to be honest. I wasn't going to wait and see what would happen or who this person was, so I flung open my small bathroom window and feet first slid down into the lower floor. My adrenaline was so high, I had to momentarily put my phone into my bra as I had no pockets and needed both my hands too. I just remember hearing the police dispatcher keep asking over and over if I'm okay and what was happening. I didn't even have time to tell her what I was doing. It just felt as though my body had gone into autopilot. Once I was on the bottom roof, I lowered myself again, now onto the pavement. As I fell, right onto my knees no less, I got right up and bolted it down the street. It was completely dark with it being mid-October as well. The dispatcher was still on the phone when I finally got onto it again, and I told her whilst running that there was someone in my home and how I just jumped out of the window to get away. I ran for what felt like forever until the lady on the phone said to focus on finding a shop where I could go into and wait for the police. I remembered my boyfriend and told the lady that I needed to call him. I made it to a Tesco Express by then, and though she wanted to keep me on the phone, I said that I needed to make sure my partner didn't go into my home and potentially risk running into the other person. I got in contact with my partner, who had just finished work. It was around 9 p.m. by then, and was driving to my house, no less. I told him what happened, and he instead started heading towards the shop that I was outside of. I felt such relief when he got here too. I remember taking a picture of my scratched up knees, and when I got into the car, for some reason I got very fixated on them. My partner called the police back for me as the shock started setting in, and he let them know that he was with me. It took some time before the police finally arrived at my home. I was told that my front door was left wide open, and in the living room the side table had been knocked over. My home wasn't ransacked, but it did look as though someone booked it out of there relatively quickly. Upstairs, my bathroom door was kicked in so hard that the door frame itself was indented in, though nothing was stolen, mind you. Once they looked over the place, I was called and told that I could return. A call-out ambulance crew was called in and they looked me over. They sorted out my knees and did some sort of assessment to see if I was okay mentally, and told me to go and see my GP the next morning about my knees. Reports and statements were written up, and I stayed with my boyfriend for 2 weeks after that. I had to hire someone to fix my door frame along with having a security system installed, as I don't think I'd be able to return without it, to be honest. And unfortunately, they never found out who this man was. My neighbors had cameras, and all we ever figured out about this person was that he was a man who just walked right into my home like it was his, zero hesitation. My front door was unlocked as I was expecting my partner to arrive soon. I live in a very safe village, mind you, and leaving the door unlocked was a very common occurrence. Though, after this, I've never left it unlocked since. I still live here with my partner and 2 dogs now, and the man has never come back, though we have quite obvious cameras around the property, along with visible security company signage, so that's probably why. But this was easily the most terrifying experience that I've had in my life. It's really hard to describe or tell to people because it's like I wasn't in control of my own body when this was happening. But like I said, autopilot went on, and all I knew was that I needed to get out of there quickly. When I was about 20, I moved out of home and into a share house with about 5 other flatmates. Generally, at any given time, there were 6 people living in the 5-bedroom house. One of the rooms had 2 beds. Now, during my 10-month stay there, I probably had about 25 different flatmates due to the high turnover. Some were travellers, backpacking around Australia, and would only stay a few weeks before moving on. But I had a good friend in there, around the same age as me. Her name was Jenny, who moved in shortly after I did. We were always joking about the many colourful characters that we'd encountered during our stay. Jenny and I both had the largest rooms in the house that were near the front, and in between our rooms was a tiny space that us flatmates used to call the broom closet. It was big enough for a bunk bed, and that was about all really, and whoever stayed in there would store their stuff under the bunk. Now one day, shortly after the broom closet had become vacant again, a Brazilian guy named Marcel, who I think was about 38 years old, rocked up and moved in. He seemed fun enough at first, I guess. He was always stoned and in a good mood, and always sharing stuff with everyone. Our house was always a bit of a party house, with drinking and smoking being pretty common here as well. But over the next several weeks, Marcel's attitude changed from this happy-go-lucky guy to sort of increasingly paranoid and angry. I remember him breaking down crying one night, and he kept saying, "The children are dying, the children are dying," and just didn't know how to help him. Another time, he lashed out at us all, and it was bizarre. And I remember coming home one time, and he was in his room with the door open, but I didn't want to look in, so I hurried to my room. But on the way, I heard him making these strange sort of grunting noises. It sounded almost animalistic too, and eventually his erratic behavior and mood swings got to a point where the rest of us flatmates spoke to the landlords, and they came and asked him to leave. He packed up his stuff, and as he was leaving, he pointed to us and said, "God would judge us all one day." After he'd gone, Jenny and I went to check out the broom closet, as we'd never seen it while it was empty, and I noticed next to the bunk, near where a person would lay their head to sleep, there was a small hole in the wall. It was just big enough that when you put your eye near it, you could see Jenny's entire room, and it overlooked her bed. Next to the hole was a faint but grubby-looking man's handprint. There were also stains further down the wall towards the other end of the bed, and Jenny was horrified to realize that Marcel had been watching her in her bedroom all this time, and also appeared to have been playing with himself. I was disgusted as well, and I mean, it was truly disturbing. We were pretty sure that he must have created the hole himself, as well as before he moved in, a young girl stayed in that room and she had never mentioned it. We both moved out shortly after this though, but during our time in that house, I'd say that that was definitely the creepiest encounter that we'd had while we were living there.